I can't sit down with this one on my lap. And here we have the Oukitel P2001. It turned off for some reason. That's weird. Didn't see that coming. Let's talk about the interface. That glare is not going to work, so I'm going to have to get some B-roll. You have this super slick, informative interface that shows watts in, watts out, percentage, and time remaining. It also has some icons on here, as you can see, that denote whether or not it's being charged from Anderson or the wall. It has this storage bin in the top for holding the accessories that comes with it or whatever you need to put in there, right? They say it has 16 total ports to charge things out of. I'm not gonna count, I just believe them. Cigarette lighter, 12 volts to 10 amps. It also has this interesting XT60 connector that's 12 volts to 10 amps. There's some implications for that as it relates to charging those batteries, that scooter batteries that Jehu sells, and maybe some other batteries. Dual 5521 ports at 3 amps. I don't know what that's about. That just seems odd to me. Why wouldn't these be higher amp limits as well? 2 normal charge, 2 quick charge, and then you have 2 dual 100 watt PD ports that are not bi-directional. They can only output power, and you have this little light. Why? I don't, a little perplexed by that one. I guess it's good to have a light more than not having a light, but that's just very interesting. Let's talk about charging this real quick. You have 1100 watts of total power that you can get into this, as long as the outlet that you're plugging it into is rated for that much power. Typical wall outlets are. You can charge this from a gas generator, obviously, because it just puts out wall electricity. I don't know why companies seek to point that out, but whatever. You can get 500 watts max of solar input into this. The input is rated at 12 to 48 volts at 15 amps. I'm a little confused about this. This is one of the shortcomings of this device, that it has a 48 volt input limit. The implications of that is that this device, you cannot put 2 24 volt, which is typically like 36 volts in real life, panels in series. You can only put one big monster panel. But if you have 2 12 volt 200 watt panels, then you're good, because they're only at like 20 some odd volts. So I would say that this particular port is made specifically for putting 12 volt panels in series. The 15 amp input limit is good too, because then you can put 3 100 watt panels in parallel. Now you may need to start paying attention to like fuses and stuff like that. I don't go that high up in parallel, but that's just me. As I talked about in my unboxing video, this is the over voltage protection button. So if it overloads, you go higher than you need to, you have to come over here and press this button 9 times out of 10. Now taking a look at these outlets over here, these have the T joints in them. Oh, this is interesting. I wonder if these are grounded, quote unquote, because they don't look like the wide space filler ones that we've had on other power stations. I know that a power station in itself does not really, let me take that back. My understanding is that power stations in themselves don't need to be actually grounded, but don't get me to talking about stuff I don't understand. I'm just pointing out the fact that these holes are a little bit different than what I'm used to. I mean, not that this has any really serious implications for me personally, and for most people personally, but it's just something that I wanted to point out. This outlets are rated at 2000 watts, normal. They can surge or peak up to 4000 watts. I don't typically find any use for that in my usage, but it is there. I don't have many devices that spike that briefly. If I have a device that goes up past the limit of a power station, it typically sits there for a few minutes, but your mileage may vary. The Oukitel P2001 does support dual charging via the solar input and the wall input in case you wanted to bump it up. That's not particularly my cup of tea, but you can do it. You can bring it up to 500 watts off of the 12 volt connector, or the solar connector, I should say, and you can bring in up to 1100 watts from the AC connector. I'm going to demonstrate that right now. You can see that it's pulling in 44 watts, sending out 74, and I'm going to plug it in to show you that it can charge at the same time from both sources. You can see that the Anderson thing is still lit, and the AC wall charger thing is lit. The input is going up and the output has not changed. You can turn on the USB, you can turn on this, and you can turn on this crazy light, which I don't think I'll ever use in my life. And you can see that it is hitting its high speed charging. It's not just giving it 700 watts, it's hitting the 1200 plus the up to 500 you can get from solar. One good thing about this device is it has no power brick. All of the charging components are in the inside of the device, so all you need is that power cable. This device does have a UPS. I've seen people talk about the UPS, but let's get into this a little bit because there's some implications that you need to know. Yes, UPS does allow you to continue to charge a device, have a device plugged into it, and then when that device loses power, the UPS is typically not the best UPS, it's not the fastest, but it will smoothly transition over from the wall outlet to the power station. Now, people talk about this as though a power station doesn't do that in its native state. It doesn't do the switchover thing, but if you have a power station plugged into the wall and it no longer is getting power from the wall or solar or whatever, the battery is what's powering the thing. Now, the implications of the UPS for most people is that you're not burning through cycles. So I just wanted to make that clear because nobody talks about that. You're not burning through the cycles of your battery. It's a great option to have, especially if you want to have power backup in emergencies when your power goes down. You can have a fridge, a deep freezer plugged into this, and if the power goes out, then there will be a smooth transition from that wall power to the battery power of the device. No problems, you be good to go. One of my favorite things to use this dip for is charging my Ego lawnmower battery, which I have right here. Now, this is a quick charger. You can see it turning up now. 481 watts is what it's using. It'll last for about 35 minutes. That's the lawnmower down there, cutting grass all from solar. Another one of my favorite things to power is this here deep freezer. Now, the good thing about this deep freezer is that it does not use a lot of power all the time. So you can see right now it's pulling no juice. But typically what it pulls is about 100 watts. Another one of the things that I like to power is this mini fridge right here. This one can pull up to 500 watts, but then settles around 77. Now, I want to talk about a couple of implications of this device. This device is running about $1,600. I'm not trying to quote the correct price at the moment because this is a theoretical kind of thing. Bluetti for the longest time has had no real competition in this price range with LiPo batteries. EcoFlow has been their main competition. Jackery is kind of like but EcoFlow nor Jackery in this particular range has LiPo batteries. So this device kind of comes in at a really good time where you could consider getting something like this. There are some pros to having a device with these kind of capabilities. 2,000 watt hour capacity, 2,000 watt inverter. It has a slightly smaller footprint, no external big battery pack to charge it. It has UPS functionality built in, 2 100 watt PD ports compared to some devices that don't even have one 100 watt. That was always my issue with one of the Bluetti devices. The voltage limitation is kind of like, man, dang, why couldn't it be higher? But you could make it work because it can take in up to 500 watts. So it's not like you had a whole lot of room to work with in the first place, right? 500 watts against the watt hour capacity is pretty good as well. You can charge it up in about 4 hours if you can figure out a way to max out those at 500 watt input. Or if you even could do that, because the 45 watt limitation and most panels, the 200 watt panels are going to be a certain amount of voltage and a certain amount of amps. They'll be like maybe 10 amps. So if you take two 200 watt panels and they're at 10 amps a piece and you combine them, you run into a similar situation with the EB70 where you're throwing away power because that amp limitation is cutting it off at 15. So it's like 10 plus 10 equals 15, right? The only thing that I could see kind of working, but still not getting you to the 500 watts, is going with those 100 watt panels. But even still, those are 5 amps a piece, so you can't put but 3 of them in until you hit the 15 amp limit on those. So it's a very interesting voltage and amperage range on this device. It's really nice to have a device that is super capable compared to some of the other smaller devices that I have. It's like now I have a big monster down in the basement to run off of this big panel right here and to provide me some pretty substantial power. This is the Renogy 320 watt that is plugged into the Oukitel P2001. Now, one thing I do want to point out is the fact that this particular device, it does something very similar to the EB120 over when it gets darker and there's not as much light coming in, the relay or the MPPT or something in it, let me just show you what happens. I'm glad this is happening now because I can get some footage of it. So what is that? This is the sound that it makes when it's turning on. But what's this coming on right here? Oh, it's just the solar joint that's blinking. So I'm glad I was able to get some footage of that. So you can see that this device is going on and off, on and off. That's not a problem for me because I store it in my basement, but if you had this thing in an RV or a van or in a small tiny home or something like that, that may get annoying and cause you to get up and unplug it. The reason why that's an issue is because you can lose out on power when your sun comes up if you haven't been around to plug it in. I don't know what that's about, but that's something to take into consideration. This device has a UPS, 2,000 watt hours of battery, 2,000 watt inverter, 2 PD ports, nice screen, very detailed screen, storage compartment in the top, LiPo batteries, pure sine wave inverter, like all the things in it. And I think it should be something that you consider. I'm losing light, and that's the end of the video. It is Holla.